This is the moment where silence becomes louder than applause, where every doubt they threw at you turns into evidence of their mistake. They never understood your path because it was never meant to be understood. You moved in silence, calculated every step, and now the outcome speaks for itself. What they called luck was discipline they refused to see. Every setback was a setup for a position they never expected you to reach. Now you stand at the top not because they gave you permission, but because your final move rewrote the entire game in your favor, completely undeniable. Silence is never empty when it is used with intention. It becomes a tool of control, a hidden force that shapes outcomes long before anyone realizes what is happening. When you choose silent strategy, you are not avoiding action, you are refining it. You are observing more than others notice, calculating more than others attempt, and preparing in spaces where noise cannot interfere with clarity. People often mistake silence for weakness because they depend on visibility to measure power, but real dominance does not need to announce itself. It grows in the background, unnoticed, until the moment it becomes impossible to ignore. Every move made without unnecessary attention removes resistance before it even forms. There is no wasted energy in explaining intentions to those who cannot understand the vision behind them. Instead, focus becomes sharper, decisions become cleaner, and execution becomes precise. Silent strategy allows you to move in a way that avoids predictable patterns. When others expect reaction, you provide none. When they expect emotion, you remain composed. This creates confusion in those who rely on reading you, and in that confusion you gain time, space, and control. Time becomes your ally because you are not distracted by validation or argument. Space becomes your advantage because you are not constantly defending your position. Control becomes your outcome because every step you take is intentional rather than reactive. Over time, this approach builds an unseen pressure around your progress. While others are busy announcing small wins, you are stacking decisions that compound into something far greater. They may not understand what you are building, but they begin to feel the shift. That feeling is often what creates doubt in them, because they cannot explain why your presence feels different or why your results appear suddenly without warning. In reality, nothing is sudden. It has all been constructed quietly, piece by piece, through discipline and restraint. Silent strategy also protects you from interference. The less others know about your process, the less they can disrupt it. Opinions lose their power when they have nothing to attach themselves to. Criticism becomes irrelevant when your actions are already complete before judgment arrives. This is how control strengthens without confrontation. It is not about hiding, it is about timing. You reveal results, not intentions. And by the time results are visible, the foundation is already unshakable. This is why silent strategy leads to undeniable dominance. It removes chaos from your decision-making, removes distraction from your focus, and removes dependency on external approval. What remains is clarity, precision, and progress that speaks louder than any explanation ever could. Over time, people begin to recognize that what they could not understand was not random at all. It was structured, intentional, and far ahead of their perception. And by then, your position is no longer something they can question because it is already established through consistency they never saw coming. Misunderstanding from others is often treated like a burden, but in reality, it can become one of the strongest advantages you ever hold. When people fail to understand your intentions, direction, or mindset, they reveal more about their limitations than about your path. They are judging your journey through the lens of their own experience, and that experience is usually too small to capture what you are building. Instead of correcting every misunderstanding, there is power in letting it exist, because while they are confused, you are free. Free from expectations, free from interference, and free from the pressure of explaining a vision that is still unfolding. That freedom creates space for real progress. You are not slowed down by constant justification, nor are you distracted by opinions that carry no real weight in your direction. Misunderstanding creates distance, and that distance becomes protection. It protects your focus from being diluted by unnecessary voices and protects your strategy from being exposed too early. People tend to misjudge what they cannot immediately categorize. When your actions do not fit into their familiar patterns, they label it incorrectly, assuming failure, luck, or randomness. But while they are busy building wrong assumptions, you are building results. That gap between perception and reality is where your advantage grows. It gives you time to develop in silence while others waste energy analyzing something they do not fully see. This is where many underestimate the strength of being misunderstood. It removes the need to perform for approval. You stop adjusting your steps to make others comfortable, and instead you align your actions with what actually works. That shift alone changes everything, because the progress is no longer filtered through acceptance. It becomes direct, uninterrupted, and focused. Misunderstanding also creates psychological space. When people misread your intentions, they lower their guard or dismiss your potential. That dismissal often leads them to underestimate the distance you are covering in silence. While they are watching for obvious signs of success, you are already building layers beneath the surface. By the time they realize what has happened, the foundation is already too strong to challenge. Another advantage lies in emotional control. When you are constantly misunderstood, you learn not to rely on external validation. You stop seeking approval and start trusting your own judgment more deeply. This independence strengthens decision-making and reduces hesitation. You become less reactive to criticism because you recognize that most of it comes from incomplete understanding. Over time, this builds resilience that cannot be easily shaken. The misunderstanding becomes a filter that separates distraction from direction. It removes unnecessary connections, reduces noise, and highlights who truly understands the depth of your process and who does not. And in that separation, clarity grows. You begin to see that not everyone is meant to understand your path at the same stage you are walking it. Some will only understand after the results appear, and by then, their understanding is no longer required for your progress. Every setback carries a hidden structure that only becomes visible when you stop treating it as failure and start seeing it as preparation. At the moment it happens, a setback feels like resistance, like something blocking your path or slowing your progress. But in reality, it is often a redirection of energy, forcing you to develop skills, awareness, and patience that you would never build in comfort. Nothing sharpens a person more than pressure that does not break them. Each delay, each loss, each disappointment forces you to observe differently, think differently, and act with more precision the next time. What looks like disruption is often training in disguise, shaping your awareness for a moment you have not yet reached. You may not understand it immediately, but every setback removes something unnecessary from your process. It strips away overconfidence, exposes weak planning, and reveals areas where your strategy was incomplete. This removal is not punishment, it is refinement. Without it, you would carry hidden flaws into your final move, and those flaws would cost you far more later. Setbacks also teach emotional control in a way success never can. When things go right, there is no challenge to your patience. But when things fall apart, you are forced to confront how you respond under pressure. Do you panic or do you adjust? Do you quit or do you analyze? These moments quietly build a mental foundation that becomes essential when the stakes are higher. Over time, you begin to notice patterns in your own reactions, and that awareness becomes part of your strength. Another layer of preparation lies in timing. Setbacks slow you down at moments when moving too fast would have been dangerous. They force recalibration, giving you space to reassess direction before committing to a path that may not have been stable. What feels like delay is often protection from premature action. Many final outcomes are shaped not by speed, but by correct timing, and setbacks often control that timing in ways you only understand later. They also build endurance. A final move requires more than intention, it requires persistence that has already survived difficulty. Without experiencing resistance, persistence remains untested. But when you are repeatedly pushed back and still continue forward, you develop a form of resilience that cannot be easily shaken. That resilience becomes the backbone of your final execution. Setbacks also change perception. They force you to look beyond surface results and focus on deeper structure. You begin to understand that not everything is immediate and not everything visible is meaningful. This shift in awareness is crucial because it prevents you from being distracted by short-term noise when long-term success is being constructed. By the time you reach your final move, you are no longer the same person who experienced the early setbacks. You have become more calculated, more patient, and more aware of consequences. What once slowed you down has now shaped your precision. What once felt like interruption has now formed discipline. And what once appeared as loss has now contributed to a level of readiness that could not have been achieved through success alone. Discipline is often underestimated because it does not produce instant excitement or sudden breakthroughs. Luck, on the other hand, appears fast, unpredictable, and impressive from the outside. But in the long game, where outcomes are built over time and not decided by a single moment, discipline becomes the force that quietly overtakes everything else. Luck may open a door once, but discipline ensures you can walk through it again and again, no matter how many times conditions change. The difference between the two is consistency. Luck is random and cannot be controlled, while discipline is structured, repeatable, and fully dependent on your choices. That makes discipline the only reliable system for long-term success. When someone relies on luck, their progress is unstable. A lucky moment can create a peak, but without preparation and repetition, that peak cannot be maintained. It becomes a temporary rise followed by decline. Discipline removes that instability by building habits that work even when motivation is missing. It creates a rhythm of action that does not depend on emotional states or external conditions. You do not wait for the perfect moment, you create progress in imperfect ones. This is where discipline begins to separate itself from chance. It turns effort into routine and routine into results that compound over time. In the long game, repetition matters more than intensity. One strong moment of luck cannot compete with years of consistent effort. Every disciplined action adds a small layer to your foundation, and over time those layers become something unshakable. While others may experience occasional breakthroughs, disciplined individuals build systems that generate progress continuously. This is why success built on discipline often looks gradual at first but becomes unstoppable later. It does not rely on sudden opportunities, it manufactures readiness so that when opportunities appear, they are fully utilized. Another important aspect is control. Luck removes control from the individual and places it in external circumstances. Discipline brings control back. It allows you to decide what happens next based on your actions today. This sense of control is powerful because it removes the uncertainty from your growth process. You are no longer waiting for things to happen to you, you are actively shaping outcomes through consistent behavior. Over time, this control creates confidence that is not dependent on external validation, but on internal consistency. Discipline also builds resilience against failure. When luck runs out, there is nothing left to rely on. But when disciplined systems are in place, failure becomes part of adjustment rather than collapse. Each setback becomes data, not defeat. This mindset ensures continuity even when results fluctuate. Instead of breaking under pressure, discipline adapts and continues forward. That ability to continue is what ultimately defines long-term success more than any single lucky moment ever could. There is also a compounding effect that discipline carries. Small actions repeated daily grow into large outcomes over time. What seems insignificant in the short term becomes powerful in the long term. Luck does not compound. It appears and disappears. Discipline accumulates. It builds momentum that increases with time, making each effort more effective than the last. This compounding nature ensures that those who remain consistent eventually surpass those who depend on randomness. In the end, the long game is not decided by who experiences the most fortunate moments, but by who maintains the most consistent actions. Luck may influence timing, but discipline determines direction. One creates moments, the other creates outcomes. And over time, outcomes built through discipline always outlast moments created by chance. The final move is never just another step in a sequence. It is the moment where everything that came before either gains meaning or loses impact. It is the point where preparation meets execution and where patience transforms into result. Many people assume success is built in bursts, but in reality, it is often decided in silence at the very end. The last move carries the weight of all the previous effort because it is where timing, awareness, discipline, and experience all converge into a single decision. One action taken at the right moment can define an entire journey that took years to build. What makes the last move powerful is not its size, but its placement. Earlier efforts create structure, but the final move determines position. You can work for a long time, make progress, and even come close to success, but without the right closing action, everything remains incomplete. The last move is where strategy becomes visible. It reveals whether your earlier decisions were intentional or random, whether your preparation was complete or still missing something essential. It is the point where hidden effort turns into visible outcome. In many cases, people underestimate the importance of endings. They focus heavily on starting strong or maintaining consistency, but they overlook the fact that perception is often shaped at the finish. The final impression carries disproportionate weight because it is what remains in memory. This is why the last move defines position. It is not just about reaching a goal, it is about how firmly that goal is secured. A weak finish can blur years of progress, while a strong finish can elevate even gradual progress into undeniable success. The last move also reflects timing, which is one of the most critical elements in any process. Even the best strategy can lose impact if executed too early or too late. Timing is not visible in preparation, it is revealed in execution. The final move is where timing becomes reality. It is the moment when hesitation must disappear and clarity must take over. Those who understand timing do not rush the final move, nor do they delay it unnecessarily. They wait until conditions align, and when they act, the result feels inevitable rather than forced. Another dimension of the last move is psychological pressure. As the end approaches, uncertainty often increases. Doubt, expectation, and anticipation all peak at the same time. Many lose control at this stage because they allow pressure to distort judgment. But those who remain composed in the final phase gain a significant advantage. The ability to stay stable when everything is on the line is what separates average outcomes from defining ones. The last move becomes a test of mental strength as much as strategic planning. The final move also reveals the quality of everything that came before it. If preparation was weak, the ending exposes it. If discipline was inconsistent, it becomes visible here. But if preparation was strong and consistent, the final move feels natural, almost effortless. It is the moment where all hidden work becomes visible success. That is why it defines position. Not because it creates everything alone, but because it confirms everything that has been built. There is also a strategic element where the final move often involves restraint rather than aggression. Knowing when to stop, when to act, and when to finalize is a form of intelligence that develops over time. The strongest outcomes are not always created by doing more, but by doing the right thing at the right end point. The last move is where unnecessary actions are removed, and only essential execution remains. In the long arc of progress, many steps may be forgotten, but the final outcome is remembered clearly. People do not usually recall every stage of the process, they remember where it ended and how it ended. This is why the last move defines position at the top. It becomes the defining mark that separates intention from achievement, effort from result, and potential from realization. It is the moment where everything aligns, and once it is executed correctly, the position it creates becomes stable, recognized, and undeniable.